Hi and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I am with two of my favorite machines, and I've just come back from riding these both back to back. And these are both projects that I've recently finished up. I've actually recently put a clutch in each of these bikes, and so they're now running as they should, and I thought it was only fitting to compare them back to back and see, you know, once these bikes are to my taste and set up the way that I like them to be set up, which one do I prefer? Which one do I like better? What are the differences between them?
Oh, that feels awesome. This is a 1981 Kawasaki CSR 1000, and man, that sound is addictive. Holy cow. It's got a Delcovic 4-into-1 pipe on it. I just did some upgrades to it, the braking and the handlebar. This bike just, it feels like it should. The thing just wants to rip. It's got a very fun attitude. It's a nice looking bike, very cleanly styled. I have upgraded the brakes with some Spiegler steel braided brake lines and refreshed the fork oil and the forks, and just done a lot of things to this bike. It's been a little bit of a project to get it dialed into where I want it, but man, it's nice. I'm glad I spent the time doing that. There's just a couple of little tidbits I may do yet. I may mess with the rear suspension a little bit, put a little bit springs with a little bit firmer damping in there. These things bounce just a little bit. It's really not bad unless you're riding pretty aggressively. But this bike is very easygoing as far as it handles very lightly, and whereas like the Honda and the Suzuki, the Honda CB900 Custom is very stable handling, this is much lighter and more flickable, and this has a little bit more suspension travel than the Suzuki, so it doesn't ever feel quite as planted as the Suzuki. It's never as stable as the Honda, but it is fun. And this is a chain drive bike, and just that percentage of that you get as far as more power with chain drive, because it's more of a direct transmission of power, it really makes a difference. It's a noticeable difference over the shaft drive bikes. This bike just picks up revs very quickly. It's an energetic motor. Snappy. I just put a new clutch in it as well, and the new clutch, just there's no slippage. I went with 15% stronger springs in it, just for peace of mind. And oh yeah, that sound. Glorious. Yeah, this bike is just, it's very comfortable now. The handlebar change, it had, the original CSR had buckhorn handlebars, and they were just garbage. I don't know how anybody rode those bikes with those. But when I sit on this, man, everything is just right where it should be. It's a little bit hard to be good on this bike just because of the playful nature of it. It really is a fun machine. All right, I am on Suzuki's 1983 GS1100L, and I am riding this bike back to back with Kawasaki's 1981 CSR 1000. And man, these bikes, in some ways, they feel so similar. They're both, you just got a big motor. They both just want to go. They're both now with the upgraded brakes. The Kawasaki stops well. This bike, I didn't even have to upgrade the brakes. They both just perform flawlessly, really from low RPM to high RPM. They're both fun. I've got the same handlebar on both of them. I've got the same exhaust on both of these bikes. Although they sound a lot different from one another, I think mostly due to the way the exhaust on the Kawasaki is routed a little bit differently. But this bike, some of the differences that set this bike apart really are the transmission in this. The gearing is a little bit what I would consider more optimal. At 60 miles an hour, I am revving 4,000 RPM on the Kawasaki, and I'm revving about 3,500 RPM on this Suzuki. And that really translates on road feel. This feels more relaxed. It's not as oh, I don't even know how to say it. Maybe it's not as twitchy as the Kawasaki. It just has a little bit longer. Each gear has a little bit taller, has a little bit longer pull. You definitely sit down in this Suzuki more than you do the Kawasaki. You sit a little bit more up on top of the Kawasaki. The suspension on this Suzuki is firmer. It's sportier. Definitely feels very tight and well controlled, even by today's standards. It is a shockingly modern feeling bike. And yeah, just this motor is one of the all-time greats. This Suzuki's big air-cooled 1100cc four-cylinder. One of the things too that I noticed is that this motor, I'm pretty sure redline's a little bit higher than the Kawasaki. And so I'm sure that top speed on this bike would actually be higher, although that's not really what I'm about when I'm riding. The broad range of power on this bike really makes the shifting, there's no spot where the engine really comes on. It just pulls hard from any RPM. And it feels great, sounds great. Handling is tight, and I feel like really, if I did a track day, which I don't really do, but if I did, I think I could go a little bit quicker on the Suzuki. But the Kawasaki is a little bit has a little bit more compliant suspension, so I would have to give, as far as the comfort on a bumpy back road, the Kawasaki is going to be a little bit more absorbent. But man, they're both just fantastic bikes. They're both very, very comfortable the way that I have them set up.
First off, I'm going to start off with the newcomer here, Kawasaki's CSR 1000. And I've just recently put a clutch in it. I've also just recently put the MGO Magna wide handlebar on it. So both of these bikes are now running the same handlebar. They have similar ergonomics, although you sit into the Suzuki more, you almost sit a little bit more on top of the Kawasaki, it feels like. But really, the way they're set up, both of these things are all-day comfortable and really set up nicely. Seat-wise, I'd have to give the nod to the Suzuki. It just has the best seat in all the muscle cruisers and cruisers of the time period, really. As far as suspension goes, the Kawasaki is a little bit more compliant. It soaks up the bumps very well with the suspension, but it's not quite as planted feeling as the Suzuki. The Suzuki just feels like you are directly connected to the road. You just know what the bike is doing at all times. And so if you're going to go out and do some sport riding, I would definitely say the Suzuki would be the pick. And then if you're just going to do general purpose riding, both of these bikes will just do that all day long. And really in the sporting department, it would be a matter of the rider, because the Kawasaki is very close. It feels very nimble, and it changes directions very quickly. It feels very flickable and fun when you ride the Kawasaki. So just a little bit of difference personality-wise there. Instrumentation-wise, these bikes both have a tach and speedometer. They each have a fuel gauge, which is wonderful. And the Suzuki just gets a nod because it also has a gear indicator, which I like. Transmission-wise, these are both 5-speed bikes. The Suzuki has one of the best shifting transmissions that they've ever put in a motorcycle. And the Kawasaki, it shifts fine, but it's nowhere near as smooth and crisp and short throw as the Suzuki. So I'm going to give the nod to the Suzuki with the transmission. The Suzuki is also shaft drive, and I like the ease of maintenance of shaft drive. The Kawasaki is chain drive, and while you can change your gearing on chain drive and it's a little bit more efficient transmission of power wise, I still prefer the shaft drive bikes just for ease of maintenance and cleanliness of use. The transmission in the Kawasaki is also geared significantly lower than the Suzuki, and that probably contributes to why the Kawasaki feels like it always just wants to rip. It's because at 60 miles an hour, the Kawasaki is revving exactly 4,000 RPM. At 60 miles an hour, the Suzuki is revving 3,500 RPM. So it's decidedly more relaxed. The Suzuki also has a little bit higher redline on the motor, and so therefore with taller gearing and a higher redline, ultimately the Suzuki would have a higher top speed than this Kawasaki does. But I may go in and change the gearing, maybe go 1 tooth different on my front sprocket for the Kawasaki, just to make it a little bit more relaxed at highway speeds. It's just a little bit too on and off throttle, and it just feels geared too low in stock form like it is. Really, these bikes are very similar feeling. They're very sporty for what they are. I do like the current setup just a little bit more on the Suzuki with the way it's already shaft drive. It's geared very nicely. It has a very relaxed, broad range power plant, and it has plenty of snap, great sound. And really the Kawasaki is so close in all of the categories here that it's just a matter of degree. It's just a little bit here and a little bit there that the Suzuki kind of edges ahead. If you have either one of these bikes in the garage, man, they're fantastic. What I like to do is take the vintage bikes and really set them up so they're everyday reliable. They're not only that, but they're safe to ride. They handle and drive as good as or better than most of your modern muscle cruisers. So I think both these projects were a success from that standpoint. But if you have a favorite among these two bikes, if you're just a diehard Kawasaki fan, or you like the styling of it better, or you like the sound, man, I get it. They're fantastic. If you're a Suzuki fan and you say, you know, way to go Suzuki, you know, I get that too. Yeah, feel free to let me know what you think. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. I get it. And motorcycling is subjective. So everybody has their own opinion, and it's what they like best, you know, what's best for them. There's nothing wrong with that. And really with either of these bikes, you can't go wrong. They're both reliable machines, fun to drive, and man, I'd be happy if either one of these was the only bike I had. I would certainly be really, really happy. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think. Have a great day.